I'm going to talk about the smartphone market and where we've gone from history and where we go forward, and wherever Phil is. Thank you, Phil. He pulled my arm and twisted me to come and give a talk, which I don't do very often, and it was a good excuse for me to actually go and work out what it is that I thought about where we've been and where we're going to, and also to troll around on eBay and try and find all the devices that I used to love that I don't have anymore, and I've managed to find them all, which is one of the other benefits of the internet. These are my builders that are here at the moment in my house, and they've been with me for nearly 3 months. That's Daz, Andy, and Neil. Classic Construction of Harpenden, very good builders if you need one. And I made them come out of the garage, which they've made into their den, and show me their phones, which they use on a regular basis. And I just thought it was interesting to start off with this point, which is, they're rough and ready lads and good fun and all the rest of it, and all of them have got the latest smartphones and they use them a lot. And you ask them what they use it for. They all use it, obviously, for email and for messaging about jobs. They look it up for locations and maps. If somebody gives them a possibility of a new job, they figure out where it is and do they really want to go and do it. They also do things like play games. They have lunch breaks and tea breaks, and they play Scrabble and backgammon and go betting and all the rest of it. So they're really good users of smartphones, while caring nothing at all about the technology. So this is what I'm going to talk about, smartphone evolution, where we've been in the past, the strands maybe that some of you know, some of you don't know, and how I think it weaves together, and therefore where are we going in the future. As we say, I'll do the Carphone warehouse bit, CTO, so all about that one. After Carphone, we had a company called WiderWeb, which was a mobile software startup, which did compression on mobile internet traffic, obviously because handsets were still extremely limited and networks were extremely limited, which was acquired by OpenWave. In the last couple of years, myself and some other guys have been running Acasta Labs, where we design mobile web services. So still very much in the industry. And I'm going to do the first section on what I would call the great leaps forward, which is, I'm starting from 1999, which for me, this is where mobile internet started. Smartphone markets, data enabling of handsets. There might have been one or two little PDA-type devices before then, but 1999 was when the first one came out. It's definitely a phone. It definitely does some sort of internet-y stuff. All the way through to 2011, and I've picked my top 4 devices that actually moved things on. And who thinks they know what the first one is? Yeah, you're too young. Not for me, it's not. And I've made up also a list of the same sort of time, which is the sorts of things. I'm not going to read it all out for you. You can read it if you're interested in the technology. But these were the number of different tick boxes, I thought, as you actually developed it through and pulled it through as to how the market's developed, what things need to be in order to be a success. And it's not all about technology. The important ones are actually right down at the end in terms of actually how you make a success of something. You can build it. Can you get them to come is the basic argument. But that's the tick list I'm going off as how things have enabled over time. That's my number 1. Anybody remember that? Yeah, the pleasure. I've got one, and I'm going to hand it round. You get to start with it. And see if you can flick it out to get the keyboard without just using a screwdriver. The Nokia 7110. This came out in December 1999. I was at Carphone for about 6 months by then. I was just laughing with Tim earlier. It was only just before then that WAP, the protocol of the future, this was going to be the internet. WAP had actually sort of said, WAP's coming, it's going to be really exciting. And Carphone thought it was going to be very exciting as well. And they had to fly people from Finland to tell them what WAP was. And it's very, very early days. But Nokia 7110, there was the first of the real handsets that came out that actually you could do a data connection and you could get a page back. And the first order that we received at Carphone was 100 units, which I don't know, they stuck it on a van out of the marketing director's house, and they sent us 100 units, which we promptly kept 40 for the management, so we can all go play with them. Auctioned, I think, 10 for charity, and 50 we put in the shop, and they didn't last very long. But the markets were tiny. You talk about Apple and their iPhone. Oh, it's wonderful. We've sold 1.5 million on the first day. We got an order of 100, and that was it, to the biggest distribution chain in the whole of Europe. These markets were really tiny at the time. As far as the tech list, tick list goes, it's got an interesting mixture. It had almost no functionality. Yes, it was data-enabled, whoopee-doo. You figured out the keyboard, haven't you? Oh, yeah. I'll auction it to you later. That is, I should say, from a cool phone side of things, it's still got that slight Matrix element to it. But the Matrix one didn't make internet calls. It was data-enabled, and it had distribution. It had Nokia behind it. They were going to give it a stab. The rest of it pretty much didn't have any of it. I put it on there basically for, as far as I'm concerned, that you could do it first. It looked like a phone, and it was the first one you could do it for. Apart from that, it said everything that was wrong about mobile internet, mobile phone companies, technology providers, and how they went around designing things. I don't know how many of you dug around in the WAP protocol and the different standards they enabled and then tried to figure out why they came up with what they did. But some of you are nodding, WML. WML as a markup language, it designed a 4-line screen. Why? Because phones were made with 4-line screens. There were 2 programmable soft keys. Why? Because handsets had 2 programmable soft keys. How big could the page be? I forget the number in bytes now. But it was because you could do it with UDP and not TCP. And if they did UDP, it would be smaller. They could manage that. So the biggest page you can have fits in a packet that our current software can cope with. It's rubbish. It's do it in reverse. What have I got? What can I shoehorn in? It won't last very well. And that's why it's never really was going to succeed long term. You needed somebody, in my opinion, that came out of the phone market and out of the handset world who designed down to what they were currently doing and kind of taken a different approach. So my most unusual handset is number 2, and some of you will know what it was. Did anybody know a Pogo? Bless you all. That's a Pogo. Have you noticed any of the drawbacks to it yet? Really? Yeah. This is December 2001, guys. Ladies and guys. Yeah, you can start with you. You're very encouraging. You figured out all the different bits, do you? Top right is the aerial, in the days when aerials stood out. Top left is where you plug the power charger in. I'll power it up for you later if you like. Bottom left is the on-off button. And if you find the little metal thing on the bottom right, if you pull it out, it's a stylus, so you can tap the screen if you don't want to use your finger. And it's made in 4 pieces out of metal, because that way you could bend around the radio modem and actually get into the device. It's very clever thinking. The entire smartphone, and the important thing I think is to think of just how many ticks there are for the Pogo. It's something we actually pushed in Carphone, and I pushed Carphone to sell, despite the fact nobody had ever heard of it, and God knows if there was a market for it. And looking back on it, I pushed that we should give it a go, because just how many different ticks in the days when it's, a year after that Nokia 7110, just how many things it actually did. And it came from the UK as well. It was built in Clerkenwell by a team of about 60 people. They manufactured the first units in Southampton, would you believe, for some strange reason. And it was a team that came out, actually it's got a bad side and a good side of this one, but that comes from investing and actually where they went wrong. It was a team that came out of agency.com, which was one of the first web agencies back in the halcyon days of the internet. And they decided that mobile phones shouldn't do WAP, they should do the full web. And how on earth do you go about doing that? So they designed a browser and some back-end server technology that would compress the pages. Then they couldn't get any of the handset manufacturers interested in it. You can see where this is going, can't you? Because who wants a browser that doesn't run any of the operating systems? So they wrote an operating system. Then they still couldn't get any of the device manufacturers interested in it, so they made a device. And they still couldn't get anybody interested in taking it on as a finished design, so they launched the service, at which point they promptly ran out of money. But it was a great device. And, talking about the time there, this is 11 years ago. It was already it was a touchscreen, icon-driven interface, all the things from Rich Media. If anybody's figured out the little hatch on the top, you can slide it around. which is great. It's got even things that the latest phones have not got. You have to twist it around with your fingers. One side you get the SIM card in, the other one you put your memory card in. That's wonderful. I was very pleased with Pogo. You can tell. But it had almost everything that the people had. What it didn't have, it wasn't brilliant on usability. And it certainly didn't have distribution. Messaging wasn't really there either. It didn't have distribution. So there wasn't nobody to sell it. And at the end of the day, these things, to going to be successful, need to be volume. While I was doing a bit of research, and you get, if you go and pull this article up, the original, there's wonderful little things further down on the page that I couldn't fit on. Pogo to the future is wonderful. It looks a bit later on, it says, it plays MP3 music. And then under that, the sentence says, MP3 stands for, and it explains what it is. That's like hilarious. Nobody knows anything. And it's that early on in the day. And you could do a full web page. Admittedly, they weren't quite as JavaScript hungry as they are today, and they weren't quite built the same way, but you could do the full web. It was wonderful. The other bit, which I liked when I pulled that page up, I don't know if anybody else has noticed it, it's in the bit on the top right. Yeah. Now look at that. See what I've just told you about all those wonderful things that it did. Radio enabled, it was still only circuit switch, we hadn't even got GPRS those days, but it could do full web, all those wonderful things, play music on it. There. The very same week that they decided to talk about the Pogo, Apple did this thing called the iPod. I think that's what they call it. Oh no, it wasn't called the iPod, it's called iPod. They've done iPod, not the iPod or my iPod or whatever else. It only takes 5 to 10 seconds to download your CD of music via your FireWire cable. This is just giving you an idea of just how revolutionary the Pogo was, and you could look at it and go, right, this is, okay, it's too big, it's too expensive, the device is too slow, it's too kludgy to work it, and all the rest of it, but this is where the future needs to go. It's kind of got most of the building blocks. But I thought it was just ironic. No Americans here, right? I'm talking ironic. The fact that Apple did this thing at the same time. It's a pack of playing cards with a neck cable connected to it. So, who's the leader, unfortunately? Number 3. Anybody have one of these? There was a few more of these ones. No, I've got one, which we're starting to. Yeah, all the good things. And you have to figure out how to get the keyboard out on that one. No, but at the day, once you've tried it a couple of times, it's great, because you hold the device and you go, I need to type something. You just tick it with your finger. It almost instantly appears. It just looks like it's magicked out of nowhere. It was a great device from that point of view. My number 3 on the list, and interestingly, it ticks different boxes than the Pogo. And it came out of, well, actually, there's lots of different strands as to why it was really great. And again, I saw an article about it in Carphone. One of the great things about Carphone in those days is, obviously, everybody knew who they were. So I phoned up Danger, who had one guy, I think, in rest of world, and everybody else was in Silicon Valley, and said, Carphone Warehouse, CTO, whatever, I'd like a device, please. And they immediately shipped one over to have a look at. So it was great. I don't know if you know about Danger. Danger was actually acquired by Microsoft a few years ago. So they are still going in different incarnations. But as a device point of view, it had some really good things about it. Again, it's very early in the day, which was good. The bits I liked about it is it was a completely new device. It came out of Silicon Valley, so it wasn't coming out of Europe, it wasn't coming out of the Far East, it was coming from an internet company. The Pogo is interesting, it actually came out of an agency, bizarrely, who just happened to have some device driver coders in their midst. But the Danger actually came out of Silicon Valley. They said, right, I'm Silicon Valley, I'm internet, I'm America, all the rest of it, but I'm going to do a phone. It was called a hip top because Americans wear them on their belt. Again, I didn't get that over in Europe. Everybody puts it in their pocket in Europe. But that's why they called it a hip top. It comes with a little pouchette as well to strap it on. But it came like the Pogo. It was primarily data first, make a phone call second. Again, very internet-centric, so that was really good. It was good on messaging as well. It was email-enabled. I liked it because it was nice and seamless. It also had this consideration, and you can't tell from that device, but there was a little plug-in camera attachment. it couldn't necessarily think straight away about MMS and all the wonderful new standards that the phone people were coming up with, which were kludgy and horrible. You just took a picture and then you emailed it to somebody. People understood take a picture and email it to somebody. It's really simple. Premium content, again, when you look on the box, it's got examples and things like here's eBay. They would take other people. Comes with AOL Instant Messaging. That was the other one I liked about it. IM, the whole idea that you would want to do internet-y things, but you're on a handset, is really good. And again, that's one sort of thing you weren't getting out of the network operators who were controlling the industry because they didn't want IM. They wanted to make 10p an SMS. But these people, they weren't coming in from anywhere near mobile phone companies, and so that was it. You did IM instead, IM and email. The other tick which it did for the first time, and I remember it being quite exciting when it came through, was all the operating system was written in Java, and it was designed to be upgradable over the air. And again, the idea is Nokia and the home phone companies were still talking about firmware. There's something in your phone is solid. It's part of the phone. And the difference with the Danger, it's a software platform, and we actually don't care who manufactures it, and I think Sanyo did the first ones. But it's a software platform, and it's designed to be upgradable. The time when I had it, which was obviously in Europe, it wasn't really even launched in Europe, I think I got 3 operating system upgrades over the air. It just said, you've got a new update, do you want to? And it would introduce new games, it would introduce new functionality, it would fix bugs. It was considered to be a software platform. And that was one of the other elements of it, which was the real first time, which was, it's a software platform first, it's a phone second, you wrap it up, but that's how you can change things as you go along. So that's the reason I like Danger. I wasn't sure about whether using the word cool or not here, but I'm going to use it. It was the first phone that there were articles about because, in this case, Paris Hilton had one. I don't know if they paid her to have one or just she liked it, but there was pictures talking about, here's Paris Hilton, and she's using her Danger. And then there was another one. Paris Hilton's Danger phone has got hacked. Is this the end for Danger, or is it the end for Paris Hilton? Et cetera, et cetera. But it was kind of talked about, which was minor, if you like. But a celebrity has got a handset. The handset is more interesting because of the celebrity. And I think, bizarrely, the celebrity is more interesting because she's got a really funky phone. Everyone's got a feature phone, and why have I got one? Suddenly, Paris Hilton's got one, and you can see her in the middle of a fashion catwalk looking up contacts, or maybe she was just playing asteroids or something because it was a bit boring. But she had one, and it sort of made each other a bit more interesting. And that was something that only really started to come through 2004, maybe. The last piece on Danger, I haven't got a slide for it, is if you go to I don't think there's any real sign of Danger over here in Europe. I haven't seen one for ages. But if you go to America, you still see Danger as a service. And the interesting thing is Danger is now a server that runs on the Android operating system. And I don't quite figure out that one and how all the pieces work together. So you've got a Microsoft company who've got a service called Danger, which runs on Android on other people's phones. But you can still buy handsets that do the Danger thing. Maybe they just like the name still. But I thought it was interesting the fact they started becoming cool. They weren't geeky toys anymore. Anyway, yeah, you knew this one was coming. I've got an iPhone to hand out, but I'm not going to because probably there's a few of you who've already got one. But number 4, in my opinion, has to be the Apple iPhone. And there was another comment yesterday on one of the news guys about one of the Facebook investors saying, well, the iPhone wasn't really a technical play. And I don't think it was to a great degree. There was almost everything on that tick list has been done before by other people. The bits that it added was the fact that you suddenly had all of it together in one package. And it wasn't the fact that it had 80% or 90%, but you had everything that I consider important for the first time in a single service. And the 2 bits that they really added, or they reintroduced, because the Nokia as the first device had one, they did the usability. The Pogo, bless it, but it's a brick at the end of the day. There's no part of your clothing you could put it on unless you have a private tailor. So they got the usability right. It's straightforward, it's nice to use, it wasn't complex, you could get involved with it, etc. It was small enough you could get it in your pocket. But they married that into distribution. The Pogo had wonderful device, but no distribution. The Danger I remember because at Carphone we spoke to them 2 or 3 times in different parts of the world, but they couldn't get distribution going. You know, the operators were trying to get services that would appeal to everybody, whatever device they had on it. So that meant they sort of took the common approach and just said, we'll only do what's possible on all feature phones, or all phones that we currently sell. So therefore, they only did MMS and WAP, which nobody really wanted to use. iPhone went the other way, and they actually said, right, we're going to do all this great big stack. We'll make it easy to use, but our name is big enough, and we have enough interest in us because of the Mac and because of the iPod, that people know we are. We've got our own shop, so we can go out, we can sell it ourselves. It'd be nice to get operator deals, and they got a few, but they kept them relatively low-key, but they could build their own distribution momentum. So Apple and the iPhone really kind of pulled everything together for the first time. And that's why they really, in my mind, I'm afraid, did kickstart the smartphone, certainly in terms of mass appeal. So that's the same timeline with my 4 devices added onto it. I think interesting, considering that the mobile internet, if you like, and smartphones, data-enabled phones they've only been around 12 years. 3 of my devices appeared in the first 4 of those. You know, so that's from barely getting off the ground. If you talk about evolution, you know, that's barely getting off the ground. It was only the iPhone that quite a while afterwards decided to kind of scrabble all the strands together and finish it off. So the question is, what's happening from here onwards? What's changing? Is there problems, etc.? There we go. Come on. Hopefully we'll have a question or two about this. This is smartphone operating systems. So my company, one of the strands of work we did was we signed a big long-term app development contract for a big media company here in the UK. And in the contract terms, which were, as usual, discussed last year before finally being signed this year, why it needs to take 9 months, I don't know. But this was the list of operating systems. They said, right, you must support it. You must be able to write apps that support all these operating systems. Oh, good, that's very useful. So we said, yes, of course we can do that. We'll figure it all out. Now, less than 12 months later, some of them have just dropped off the list of even remote interest. You know, some of them have stopped existing altogether almost. Some of them are just not interesting whatsoever. And we've got 2 that haven't even, looking future-wise, I've got the BlackBerry with their new operating system and the Windows phone. They haven't even really been released yet. So in the period even of just 12 months, you've sort of halved the market in terms of some complexity, which I'm not sure if it's a good sign or a bad side, really. But I'm erring towards a bad sign. Looking at those operating systems, you also figure out they're actually not very new and not very different. We're going right back into the annals of history. iOS, Android, and the new version of BlackBerry, definitely, they're all based on Unix. And Android especially, it's just a reskinning on a user interface and a bit of a package of a Linux core, which is a Linux core, which was a rip-off of the Unix core, etc. BlackBerry and the BNX, which is Xenix, which is a company that they purchased, which again is Unix core. They're all Unix, which came out in 1969. They're not operating systems. They're rehashings of old operating systems and tidying up and speeding up, etc. The other one that's slightly different is Windows Phone. And that's a point I can give you history to back it up if you don't believe me. But Windows Phone came from Windows, which came from Windows NT, which was written by Dave Cutler, who used to head the VMS package, who was at Digital, and therefore if you ever used VMS, and I was a VMS system manager a long time ago, Windows NT looked exactly the same with a bit of graphical skinning. And that came out in 1978, and he was probably playing with the idea for another 4 or 5 years before then. This stuff is ancient in terms of a platform. Nobody's coming along and saying, tell you what, smartphones, they're great. I'm going to write a new operating system. They're not. It's like I'm going to do a new library that wraps up something else. So operating system evolution is pretty stagnating, which I find a bit of a concern. Who's the real sort of shakers in the market? It's just another interesting slide when you pull things together. You can argue backwards and forwards, but if you look at the sort of news articles and who's making waves, or if somebody does something, if you got the pogo, don't buy them, it's throw it to the table behind you. You can't hog all the good stuff. Who gets column inches from what they're doing in smartphones? And I'd really put the three up. But bizarrely, Microsoft make column inches despite not releasing their phones really yet. Which is kind of interesting. It must be a success of their marketing policy to a certain degree. Well, they'll buy Skype. What does that mean for smartphones? What does that mean for the phone market? Obviously, Apple, obviously, Google in their different ways. I then added these three on because they're not paid attention to as much, certainly the visibility that we see. They're doing stuff, and they're coming up with devices, or they're coming up with services, or they're attempting to enter markets, but they're sort of read, but not really sort of considered in depth. So that's I sort of picked out as my sort of top 6 people who were kind of moving around the market, and then just for curiosity went and looked at their market cap. They're just vast companies. And you think about agility and introducing new products, and the good and the bad of the smartphone market is it's just enormous. And the amount of money that's sloshing around, or how big you have to be, I think is the problem in order to make a real splash in it. Introducing a phone or whatever you want to do is ridiculous. Even, I'd sort of tweak these slides as over the last 3 or 4 weeks, and as the markets move, you get market caps are moving by $10 billion one way or another. Oh, that's a good bit of news. I've done a new operating system release. That's excellent. $15 billion on your share price. That's bigger than the entire tech industry for the UK. And that's just on the back of a news rumor. And it's people, when you look back to the Pogo, when they started off, they had £6 million worth of funding, which doesn't last very long. If they'd have had success and somebody had ordered 10,000 units, they couldn't afford to make them. They didn't have any money. You can't buy the components at that rate. And unless you're absolutely mammoth, with mammoth cash base built up behind you, you can't afford to enter it in any sizable way. And if you can't afford to enter it in any sizable way, then you're really going to struggle, because you just won't be seen. And if you're not seen, you don't listen to. If you're not listened to, then nobody wants to buy your devices. So it's good that they've been able to produce the market, but I'm slightly worried about where they can take it to. The other bits that I'm interested in, these didn't make my top 6, but they're to watch, and they meet the criteria of, and I'll come on to this, they've got most of the pieces, or you could see how they fit into an overall market. And they're quite big. Amazon, I think I drew a line that you need to be at about $90 billion in size before you can think about be a big swinging player in the smartphone industry. And Amazon's almost there. They've got something, they've got bits of it, but they're a bit like Apple was, really. They haven't quite got the right product to be a smartphone, but they kind of got lots of bits of it. And it'd be interesting how they pull it together. The others just do pieces, and again, I'll explain my thinking there. They do pieces, but they do them very well, and they've got enough money. That's the interesting one of that. Any operators here? Bless. No, there you go. I do like you all, honestly. What do you think about the mobile operators? Are they here? Are they going to change the industry? And the answer is not, in my opinion. But I'll explain why. This is in various scribbled forms. It's the first time I've ever written it down, actually. I used to draw this for people when I was at Carphone, and we used to invest in companies, and where we could help startups as well, if they sort of came to us and said, I've got an, and this is always the interesting, I've got an, and they would explain what they've got. And I draw this to them and say, okay, well, what have you got? What are you making? Have you got an idea, in which case you've got some intellectual property? Have you got a little software module that does something or other? Okay, well, okay, you've probably got a component then. Okay, if you've got a great product, that's wonderful. Do you have everything that a product needs in order for you to be able to talk to a distributor? We at Carphone, we are distribution. Do you have everything we need? Do you have packaging? Do you have marketing collateral? Do you have a campaign message? Do you have stock? Do you have inventory? Do you have a returns policy? If not, then you don't have a product. If you only got a raw thing, then you've got a component again. in which case you have to go find somebody else who's going to wrap your component and make it into a full product, branding, whatever it might be. So I thought I'd pop this out and then start putting companies onto it. This is how the market used to be. So you can try his first bit of animation. Phones used to be product. You could take a phone to market and you could put it in a box and you could take it to distribution and you could sell it, and you can't anymore. That's the one. There's only one of those. The market's changed, and it's changed over the last 10 years, and smartphones have made it. Feature phones, a phone might still be a product, but it's not anymore. It's a component. And that's the problem. If you're going to do a smartphone, you have to do or have the answer to all those things. And your product that people buy into is your overall ecosystem, of which the phone is one component. And that's, again, one of those things that a lot of people don't quite get. You can't do a phone anymore. And if you can't be an ecosystem, then you have to start figuring out what you do, or where you fit into it. And if where you fit into it, then I need to work out which is to who else do you need to talk to in order to kind of start making some money. So I popped the other people on the list. And it explains the good bits and the bad bits, as far as I'm concerned. Nokia used to make products, and now they don't. They make components of somebody else's product, apart from the feature phone market, which is, despite the fact that they're doing exactly what they've done, the market's moved on. Okay, they do some services, I don't think particularly well, and not enough to get people's interest up. Any Nokia people here? Excellent. Right, I can talk this story through. We were writing an app for the Symbian platform, and the idea was that we would get it onto Nokia phones, which was fine, which is what they wanted to do. And in the product of that, we said it would go onto Nokia services, etc. And we said, okay, how do we tie into your upgrade routines for the app? When we come out with a new version, how do we automatically get it onto people's phones? I don't know what you mean, was the response. Not, we don't have it, or it's coming on Tuesday. It was, what are you talking about? It's like, well, we go onto Android, and they go to the marketplace, and it automatically says, okay, you've got a new release ready. You click the button, and it installs it, and you do the same for an iPhone. With Nokia, it was, I don't understand. If you need to upgrade your app, then write that routine into your handset, into your app. And it's that sort of thinking which you get into problems with. This is why you become a component owner. Google did a search service. They'd done services. They decided to do an operating system, and they're on the move, and that's the interesting one on Google. They don't have a product at the moment. What they do have is lots of components of an ecosystem, and I think they're trying to get to the point where they've got the lot. Microsoft always, again, did operating systems. Again, I think they're happy to be a component. And I don't think they've particularly got a pretense at being a whole product, but that's why they do so much partnering, and I have to give them some credit for that. I'll move on to the people around in product. Obviously, Apple have got the whole product. And I think, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on your thinking, Apple did it very well. They did come up with a whole product. They figured out what people want, and they put all the pieces together, and they put it onto the market. Amazon, I've put them on the list there because they kind of want to watch. They've got all the pieces. When you talk about distribution, they know how to distribute stuff because they're a shop. So they already know the distribution piece. But they're really into the technology side of it. They did their EC2 and their cloud infrastructure, etc. They know that they can build services. With the Amazon people, it's not that they can sort of launch a media service and then think, oh my God, I've got it on 2 servers in the back end of Buckinghamshire somewhere. How would I scale it? They know that if 100 million people hit them on the first week, it's fine. They have the infrastructure and they'll just switch it all on. So they have a way into the market. And I've put RIM in there because they've got a product. You can go and you can buy a BlackBerry and you sign up for BlackBerry services, and you can get your messaging working and you can get your BBM, etc. So they're still in a product phase as far as I'm concerned. The danger with RIM is as the ecosystem develops and adds new components to it and features, that they'll suddenly get to the point where they don't have the whole answer anymore. People's expectations will have gone beyond what RIM can offer, and their platform that they develop, while be good for messaging and good for corporates, can't easily evolve into what it needs to be the rounded product of the future. So they're definitely still in the product space, but they're in danger of falling out of it and falling back to being a component. which will be the end of them, really. Or, they're in danger of it not working. Before I was at Carphone, I used to work at 3Com. Remember them? Data networking equipment? Good, some smiles. And they were like Cisco. They offered the whole solution. You could get routers, switches, Ethernet cards, ATM equipment. You could do the whole lot. And that was great. And people would come, and not as many as obviously for Cisco, but they would come and they would buy the 3Com story, and they'd get the whole networking infrastructure from 3Com. Until a new CEO arrived, and he said, well, we don't make any money on routers, and we don't make any money on ATM cards. But we do make money on switches and this bit. So we'll can all the product lines that don't make money, and we'll just keep the ones that make money. At which point you couldn't buy the whole solution from 3Com anymore, and everybody stopped buying 3Com. Even the profitable ones. So it's missing what people want to buy. They don't want a switch, they want a network. And so that's the kind of danger we're in, but they're definitely still in the product space. But it also explains to me where Vodafone is and the other mobile operators, which is why even though they're vast, even though they have user traction, their distribution, they sell products, they don't design products. I just got my nice text by good timing this week saying, unfortunately we're shutting down our Vodafone 360 service. Please move your personal contact data somewhere else. No, I only ever got it because we were doing some work with Vodafone and I wanted to know how it worked. And the answer was incredibly badly. Their distribution. And so they're very valuable people to have in the whole market, but they don't add anything from a product point of view, from an innovation point of view. They just need to be able to collect money and keep the back end working. This is me just talking with our team. Well, what would you still do now? If you were looking to invest money or into new markets, what's still a problem? And this is the list that we came up with. The one in the bottom right is mine. Doesn't really say what it is, but there's another slide on that one. Batteries. If you look at the Pogo, I passed around, and the danger, neither of them work, but they do if you plug them in. And the problem is the handset works perfectly well, even after 10 years, but the battery's gone. So batteries still don't work particularly well. They don't have a lot of longevity. Interesting when you look at, I don't know if anybody, I don't even know if they still do it, to be honest. Carphone every month used to put out a magazine that sort of said, these are all the phones, and they used to list the most important features. One of the first 2 or 3 items was always battery life. How long will the battery last for? Talk time and standby time. The next one after that would be, this is 99s when I first played, does it do SMS or not? It used to be a tick box, yes or no on different, some parts of the market have moved on. Who would ask that question? It sort of dropped off the importance level. Batteries is one of those ones that's still at the top of the list. The iPhone comes out of the list. There's a problem with it, the battery doesn't last very long. Oh shit. After 12 years. And that's with 12 years of technology and billions of devices out there. So if you're in battery technology, wonderful. You've still got a lot of work to do. Top right, that's my discussion around search. There are a lot of search vendors. Well, actually, there are lots of people doing bits of what you might call, but it's still very hard to find things. As a result of having Daz, Andy, and Neil in my house, I need to find a flooring fitter. Can I find one that does parquet flooring in the Hertfordshire area? No. 3 search engines, 4 online business directories, and I'm still struggling to find somebody in a relevant telephone number that they'll actually talk to you with. So there's stuff around finding things and finding what you want in a nice way that's still got a lot of work to do. Usability. Again, this isn't one of mine, actually, this is Martin's, who's one of my partners. Usability still got a lot going for it, a lot to be done. I don't know how many of you develop apps or for app platforms, even Android, which seems very successful. The user interface is quite limited still. There's a developer over there, so we can talk about it afterwards. The user interface elements are crude. You can do stuff on an iPhone that you can't do on Android. You can do stuff on an Android that you can't do on a BlackBerry. You can do, it goes on, and you sort of work bashing your head at stuff that you would like it to move more slicker or easier to do things, and you can't. Usability is very difficult. And the last one I had down as sort of making sense of the world and how you use it. Many of you probably got kids. I've got 3 from the age of 14 through to 6, and they've never known a time without the internet for the older one, and they haven't known a time without the mobile internet for the younger ones. And there's an interesting there, they don't think about information the same way that I do. I'm used to, I've got a book, I have bookshelves, I like books. They smell of paper, and it makes me think of fusty libraries. But I know I can't find anything, and I have to troll around for books for ages, but I enjoy the way. The idea that every bit of information you might possibly need to know is seconds away, therefore you don't need to know any of it. All you need to do is know how to find it. You don't actually have to retain it anymore. And because of that, they fly a long way. It's like ice skating. They fly a long way, my kids, but they never really get very deep. I'm happy to go swimming. They just go, like, that's it, and they've gone. They've got a fact, it's in their head, they write their piece of work for school, then it's gone out their head again. But they know they could go back onto Wikipedia and look it up after that if they wanted to. And it's apparently it's changing how people think, but maybe Brian Cox will talk more about that. But there's a lot of there about what people used to do and how services used to get built isn't how you should build them in the future, because people don't use it the same way. So a few things if you are investing, and that means whether you're building a new product for your own company, or you work for a big company, or you're an investor or a VC, some of the strands you should look at. So one is be realistic. Don't think I'm going to enter the smartphone market and come out with a great new smartphone operating system. You'll be at it for 10 years, and if you haven't got $10 billion, you'll never be able to satisfy the distribution chain. Extend an ecosystem. We had the same argument, the same point I just made about Apple and RIM. The ecosystem is evolving. What people hadn't thought about, they're now thinking of. Things that some people thought would be useful now is mandatory. And there's still elements to do there of adding in automated backup services, adding new forms of messaging type services, etc. Who would have thought a compass is a great thing to do, or using it as a telescope? So there's lots of different ways to extend the ecosystem, which is the sort of thing that my company gets involved in. The last one, again, get known. Because the market is so enormous, $400 billion or whatever, $600 billion if you add it in, even if you just get mind share by 1% of those people, you've got an enormous company, and somebody who has got an ecosystem and lots of cash may well want to snap you up. Mobile only. This is another strand that we have in our area, web services, which is mobile is important. We're talking about smartphones here. We're talking about that whole mobile industry. But if it's only mobile, what you've built, you're only going to be a component of somebody else's mobile ecosystem, or you're a bit player. For us, we have to write a mobile interface, an app interface, a mobile web interface, a web interface. People just want to consume. They don't care. If it's only on their mobile, they won't care enough about it. The last part isn't my own quote, but it was, this is a conference last year. From Fred Wilson, which is if you really want to have a company that makes a fortune, you've got to figure out a new market with its own ecosystem and wait for people to hang off you. He was a Facebook and Twitter investor, if you want to know where his arguments have stood up or not. And I think he's made a lot of money, and good for him. To conclude, this is the end. I actually wrote this quite downbeat. Monoliths and ancient technology, and I didn't really reflect how I felt, so I tweaked it slightly. The first two bits are the same. But it is interesting, I've admittedly only in the last few years, but I have gone over to the Apple camp. I have an iPhone, I have an iPad, I have a Mac. And interesting, there's now 50% of the things that I do on computing, I prefer to do it on my phone, even though my Mac is next to me. Or I'll prefer to do it on the iPad. I prefer to browse on the iPad. I'm getting to the point I prefer to do email on the iPad than I do on my Mac. I know my iPad is automatically backed up. The apps are automatically updated. I know that things are secure. I've got inbuilt 3G connectivity. I haven't got any of that stuff in my Mac, and it's only 2 years old. So I'm already getting to the point where actually it's far more complete as an entity than it is of the one that's been around for 10 years and people have made their names on. On that basis, there's still stuff to do. And I think there's scope to enhance. So, thank you.